Hi friends, and welcome to the 5th episode in this series of GraphQL tutorials. So a disclaimer, as I am doing this as a live stream, I might suddenly be confused by some reason, and well, that is like more like developing in real life. You get confused and I might pause at some seconds, but let's go to the coding, shall we? So first, a little list of what we are going to look at in this episode. We are going to mock up data for a dummy shop application. We are going to do some CRUD operations. Well, obviously not using the REST because this is GraphQL tutorial, but we are going to do some mutations for updating, creating and deleting mocked users in a mocked user store. And then we do a recap, and if you have some questions when you're watching this live stream, just write them and I try to answer them. So let's jump to the code. So there are two new folders here that we did not have in the previous episodes. It's application and interfaces. So as we're going to mock up some data here, let's create a new file, iShop application. And to not make this more painful, coding all this at once, I have just pasting in this code. So I have this interface iShop application where we have to implement a current user property that is going to be used. We're going to use in this me resolver that we had been using as an example in the previous episodes. And we have a user store that is essentially just a list of mocked users of the type user. Let's add one more interface, a user store, and in that we're going to add a contract for the different CRUD operations, adding, deleting and updating and so on, and one function to receive all users. So with that being done, those interfaces, let's add a mock shop application. That implements, oh no, that's not how you do it. Yeah, confusing. iShop application. Yeah, and let's implement interface. So store, and we shall mock and user store here as well. Let's implement it. Create user, delete user, and in the constructor we can just add an we should maybe just declare a prop with a list of users here. Let's see, how did we do this stuff? I use a store, yeah. Maybe what we should declare this private. And let's see, we probably have to instantiate this as well. Having trouble working out with this today. Let's see, users add. Let's see. So let's tidy up this code a little bit, because I was being a bad boy and I was probably defining this user here. So let's clean this up and put it in models instead. And while at it, define a dummy ID. So ID1 name, let's add one more user. Let's do Scott Hanselman. Why not? So well, and the create user, let's just this users. Delete user. Oh, yeah, obviously that one is needed. So that looks more correct. Just return deleted user. And just return these users. Oh, I think we can do like this. Oh, here I did a stupid mistake. This need to take an user object as well, so let's put that in this implementation. User as Visual Basic again, well confused. User and I think this probably should work because it gets mutated in the list. Well, we will find out about that later. So not the correct way to do things. Yeah, like that, and return the user. So now we have implemented the user store, and let's just have it initialized here as well. Let's just mock it directly here in this, in the constructor. Yeah. So now we can look at the GraphQL code side of things. So let's go to the root query, and let's use this in we should probably define it one thing more. Let's see, one thing more. Store. To do things a little bit ugly here, we could do mock shop application in. Let's do this a little bit in the startup. Let's define a static class here. Application new file. So, okay, obviously that will not work. Now I am being confused. So let me just think about that for a moment. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I wanted. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the GraphQL root query. And in this me, we had defined it in the previously episode. We had a CTX argument called testing, just for trying this out. So let's change this to ID. And as a default value, we just give it 3, just to have something. And change this to ID. And we should return from this app container, mockshop app, current user. So let's build this and test how it works. So let's try it out in GraphQL Playground. Docs. Let's try without an ID. We get a null reference. Okay, we probably have to initialize that as well. What about that? Let's rebuild. Oh, now it's working correctly. So now we are actually fetching a little bit more realistic data, even though it's mocked data. Let's move on to doing the mutations. And before we do that, we can correct this thing, because obviously when we are having this me resolver, it's not supposed to work like this, because me is always going to return the current user, your user. So we shall not have any arguments in that one. So let's delete that and move on to the mutations. And look at this resolver that we had in the previous episode called update me, that is mutating the current user. We can skip that for now, and instead we can move on to defining the mutations for mutating the user in the user store. So let's look at the plan again. So write mutations for updating, deleting, creating entities in the mocked user store. Yeah. To just define some code now, let's do it like this: update user. We will clean this up with a different type here than string graph type, because this mutation is not going to return a string. Instead, it's going to return, and let's see, mock update user returns an user. So we're going to change that to a different type. But for now, we are just defining those things up. So and change, oh, just return null from now on. And we have create and delete user. So now when we have done this stuff, let's create a new folder called, well, it shall not be in the schemas folder, but let's go to the root. We can name it types. And here we shall add a new file called user input type. And it's a class that is going to be used for doing inputs when doing the mutation. And this is inheriting from input object graph type. So in GraphQL, it's a difference. When you are returning something, you are actually inheriting from object graph type. When you are going to use inputs, you use an input object graph type. And this, we need to use GraphQL types. Oh. Let's just give it a name like user input type. And actually, as we have watched in a previous episode, we can use generics here and take user and field, we have an anonymous function ID field x. So now we have defined the user input type. So let's tidy up one thing more here before moving on, because I have defined the user type here in the root query. So let's move that one out and create it here in the folder user type. So to tidy up things just a little bit. So let's go back to root mutations. Let's change this to user type. Let's see, what is it? Okay. So let me be confused for some seconds here yet again. Yeah. I forgot to have a using statement now when I moved this class to an own file. That was the problem. So now it's not returning any syntax errors. So now we should define an argument that we can pass to when doing this mutation. So we might start with the easiest one, delete user. Because delete user, we are going only to pass an ID. So new query argument. And let's add one new query argument. And because we are expecting an ID, this is of int graph type. And the name is ID. Let's see, there's one thing that is missing here, the best of. So let's be confused yet again. New query arguments, that is correct. This is correct. Oh, that is needed. So confuse level once more here. I was using the Visual Basic.NET syntax, so it should be like this, probably. Yeah, now it's working. So let's fetch that ID that the user is sending when doing that mutation. So var ID ctx arguments. Oh, and like that. Let's see if that works. Probably not. Let's do it the simple way. And we have a reference to the static class that was app container and the mock shop, and we have the user store, and we delete the user, We pass the ID and let's return that deleted user. So let's see if that could work. And now it's giving me some errors here. Probably it should be. Can it be like this? No. So confused yet again. Let's look at that. So you take arguments. So that is better. Let's run this code. Let's look at the GraphQL documentation. Now we have some more mutation possibilities here, and you can see that there are returning use type, update user, delete user, and delete user. We can see that it expects an ID. So let's try that one out. Mutation, delete user, and then you pass as a variable ID and 2, and let's see what this gives us. Oh, it deleted that user, but now we don't have any way to query the user, so let's define that in the root query. Field, and it's a list graph type of user type. And users, and resolve oh, I forgot. Oh, return app container mock shop user store get users. Now it might be a little bit more realistic. We can see the users. Oh, let's see, what did I forget? Oh, confused level yet again. Let's see if what I didn't miss here. Missing the obvious expected. Let's see, what did I miss here? So this seems like it's a bug in Visual Studio Code. Yeah, it's a bug in Visual Studio Code. There it is. Okay, that was surprising. So let's add that resolve function back. Let's refresh. Oh. Let's add the description as well. Let's see if our playground works better. Oh, wrong URL. So I did broke something here, obviously. Let's remove this build again. So that obviously works correctly. Let's just do it like this. A container, store, get users. That is working as expecting. Users, and it's this graph type. Let's rebuild this. Launch playground. Oh, now we had updates. So let's fetch the dummy data. Then we can see that we have those in the user store. So let's do a mutation. Delete user ID. Well, obviously we cannot see the ID in here because I did not define it in the user type class. but we can fix that after this. So let's delete the user, and we want to see the fields email and name. So let's do the query updates and see what happened. So now we have only this user in the store. Let's delete the ID of 2. Do the query again. Now it's empty. So our delete mutation is working correctly. That is nice to know. So the recap, this is how we defined the delete user mutation. Now let's do the same for creating user. Let's look at the other operations, that is creating and updating. So let's look at the create user resolver. So let's create an argument, new query argument, new query argument, and this time we are going to use our user input type that we defined previously, that is having the fields from the user class. So let's go back to root mutation once again. We have the new query argument. Then what do you think? What should we put here? Of what type? When we were using the ID int graph type. So yeah, I think you are correct. You are correct. User input type. And let's name that argument to user. So in the resolver, we are returning in the context arguments, and the key is the same, user. So I think we can do it like this, yeah, as user. And then let's take the app container mock shop user store, then create user and pass that user, and we return that user as well. So let's just try this so we can watch that it's working step by step. We bring the GraphQL playground, and if we look at mutations here in documentation, you can see that we have create user and it's of user input type. Let's once again, let's fix one thing. I named this query updates. That sounds very weird. Let's fix that. Root query, users, yeah. That's better. Create user. So let's just look again the users. So we have those two. Let's do a mutation. Create user and user and ID. This should not really be needed because ID is probably if you're using the database like or an ORM like entity framework, that ID shall be incremented automatically. But in this case of this as a demo application, we just give it 5. And name, let's call it a Swedish name, and email Joe at Doe. And we return the email and the name when we have created. So let's see if that works. Oh, we returned a null value. Something happened on the way. Let's see if we can debug this. Root mutations. Let's hit a breakpoint there. Let's create a user. Null. Let's check for arguments. We are actually receiving user. So there is something that is happening when it's doing the cast here. So maybe we can do it like this. Let's rebuild it. No, that is not working. Cast type to type user. So that is not working as expected. This is rather strange. Let's just use this. So let me just think about that for a minute or two. So we should use a function called getArgument, obviously. Let's do that. And that is going to typecast this correctly. User and the name user. Let's build this again. Well, now it's working, obviously. So we did return the created user. Let's look at in a new tab and do a query for that users. Oh. Wrong port number. Yeah. So we have that Magnus Jonsson. Let's add one more. Let's increment this, and then Abramov. Oh, that is working perfectly. We are having a create mutation working as well. So before we are moving on to the update user resolver, just let us fix one thing here. Let's add one more field. So now let's move on to the update resolver. So in this case we are actually expecting two arguments. I'm just going to copy and paste this So why do we need two arguments in this case? Let's look at the mock user store. The update user function is expecting an ID and a user. So let's copy this. Let's add one more query argument, and it's of user input type. Oh. Yes. So, and var ID and int. Probably that int. Well, Visual Basic once more again. And ID. And now let's just grab it from the app container. Get users where let's see. We are going to need to use link queue. First or default, and I think actually we can mutate this bias. Maybe not the most beautiful code. But let's try to see if this works out. Update user. So let's just look at the users that we have. Maybe I just write an ID. Oh, we do not have that field. Let's create a user once more. We just give the ID 4. Then Abramov. Yes, we have it here. And we have the ID 4. Now let's try out to update the user. And we can actually just paste this ID 4. Let's see, it's not really unknown argument user on field. Let's see, maybe it's not really updated the schema documentation here. Update user. So something is wrong. Let's see, what can that be? We have defined two arguments called user and ID. So that looks correct. Let me just copy and paste this outside of the screen and we restart playground. Oh. Oh, now it's working. So let's just add that user once more. Create user. And we can do the mutation and we can just copy. As we see in this documentation here, it's expecting two arguments, ID and user. So update. So let's change this to then rough instead. So before we do that, just look at the users to see that we actually have a user called Dan Abramov. Oh, I added 2 instances of those. Okay, well, let's do the mutation, update user, Microsoft. Okay, the user is updated. Let's see if we can see that when we are doing the users query. It's not working. Well, let us fix that. So obviously it's not mutating here. So I need to change that. Let's see if we can do it like this. Let's fix that. Let's stop that. Well, this was very stupid of me. We should use, I don't know what I was thinking, update user, ID and user. Yeah, that's it. Okay, let's try this once more. So now we only have those users. Let's do the mutation yet again. Dan Abramov. That is working as expected. Let's see history. We can users. Let's use that. Well, we have Dan Abramov added. Let's see if we can update that. Oh, with ID 4. Let's try if the mutation is actually mutating something. Dan Abramov, Dan Roof, something like that, maybe. And let's see, users. Oh, it's not mutating. Well, that's a total different story. something wrong in the implementation on how to update the user here in the mock user store. So that's a total different thing, I think, because if we set a breakpoint, let's do the mutation yet again. We can see that we receive it here, user to update, and the user, this is the fields that is going to be changed. So obviously we are getting the correct data in the mutation. It's just so that I am not doing the change in the list of users here. So, well, I can fix that in a later episode when we are going to move forward with GraphQL. But let me wrap this up to what we did in this episode, in this live stream today. So we defined interfaces. Actually, we defined two interfaces, iShop application and iUser store, and we implemented them populated it with some user data, some mocked user data, and we had an app container with just a static class, so that the information is always existing when we are doing a new HTTP request. So an ugly way to do things, but in this demo example, it's a workable method to do. And then we tidied up the code a little bit from previous episodes and we created a folder called types, and we created user type and user input type. And after that, we defined the mutations. We did a delete user. That is probably the most easiest of them all in this case, because we are just receiving an ID, and we are deleting the user with that ID. So, well, as I said in the disclaimer, this is a live stream, and I get confused at times, but I hope that you understood something of what I was trying to show here. I will post the code on GitHub, and you can watch this live stream later on, because it's going to be on my YouTube channel. So I thank you for your patience, and I would love to see you watching my live streams again, and I love to get feedback, so please make a comment about that, and subscribe if you want to get notifications about the next episodes. So with that being said, I just want to say I wish you all the